past 5 o'clock, so I think we can go ahead and get on with the show, right? Tonight we're going to be playing a full walkthrough, full run-through game of Marvel United, at least one. The playtime on it seems a little shorter than some other games. It's one of the easier of the various Marvel games out there, so we may do a couple of run-throughs with different heroes and villains, depending on how time's going and I guess how I feel. But for now, we'll go ahead and start with just the core set and see how it goes. So, for the single player game, and before we start, just to let everyone know, I did a little modification of my camera and audio setup, so I hope that the audio is better today than it was last time, and the camera is clearer and brighter than last time as well. And, oops, give me just 1 second, I need to do one thing with the lighting. Alright, sorry about that. I forgot the overhead lighting that casts glare on the game. So hopefully it's nice and clear now, and we can go through and get this thing going. So because we're playing the one-player configuration, I'm going to have to pick 3 of the heroes to play as. So I would ask if there were any preferences out there, but I don't think we really have anyone that's going to answer. So I guess we could do the core 3 Avengers. We could either do Cap, Iron Man, Hulk as the core Avengers, or we could do something else, but I don't know as it matters for this first playthrough. So let's go ahead and do core 3, and we will use Red Skull as our villain for this game. Need to get my Red Skull Master Plan deck ready. So where'd they go? I guess these are all I've got for the Red Skull deck. Everything else in here is Ultron and Taskmaster. So there's our Red Skull deck. Need our 3 hero decks. So for this particular playthrough, grab Iron Man. Oh, there are my Red Skull cards. Mixed in with the heroes for some reason. We'll grab Iron Man, Hulk, and Captain America. And then we'll get our tokens out. As well as the Cosmic Cube here, which is used for tracking the path on Red Skull's villain card. We'll set those aside for now. Over here off camera, so they're kind of out of the way. Get our villain dashboard set up in the middle here. So, villain dashboard with our Red Skull villain card. Put our counter for the fear track on 0. Set up our 3 missions side missions of rescue civilians, defeat thugs, and clear threats. It's really warm in here, so I've got the fan going, but I don't want it swinging back and forth and blowing cards everywhere, so got my challenge cards and threat cards here, so I'll set those aside for a minute. Set aside my hero decks for a minute. Let's shuffle out 6 location cards, so I don't really know what order they're in to start with, so shuffling them doesn't really matter too awfully much. But go ahead and set these up around the villain dashboard. I'm going to turn them this way for a single player game so I can read them. So there are 6 locations for this game. We've got Avengers Tower, Times Square, the SHIELD Helicarrier, Central Park, SHIELD Headquarters, and Stark Labs. So for each of those, go ahead and shuffle up my threat cards and put the threat cards on each of them. Alright, and then I'm going to mark my civilian and thug indicators on each card. So grab some villain and thug tokens here. Start going around to mark our starting villains and or thugs. So, as I said in the introduction stream for this game, different cards in the villain's master plan deck will add additional villains additional thugs or civilians to the locations as we go. And those tokens we'll be clearing using our hero abilities from our hero decks, trying to use those to complete the side missions here. So completing the side missions will allow us to get access to more options in the game, including, after we've completed 2 of them, attacking the villain directly. So it's a significant step in progressing the game, because the only way to win is by defeating the villain, Red Skull in this case, who, because we have 3 characters in the game, we have 8 health for Red Skull, and 10. It's not necessarily the table I need to improve, it's getting the camera further away. But I definitely understand what you mean. This is just the best I've got at the moment, so. Alright, so there are my starting civilians and or thugs on each of my locations. And now we'll place the hero decks on one side, the villain deck on the other side. And hopefully leave enough room for the storyline in the middle. You know, it's probably a little smaller than I'd like it to be for streaming, but I'm slowly incrementing my setup and my capabilities. So we'll go with this one for now, and hopefully continue to improve it as we go along. Yes, audio and video were my first concerns, so I think I'm almost there with those, and then we'll deal with the play area. So if you watched the introduction stream, you'll remember that as we play cards each turn, we play in a 3 hero actions for every 1 villain action. But then once we've completed the first side mission, which is any of the 3, there's no order to the side missions. Once you complete any of the 3, we condense them down to the right, and that unveils the first space to the left, which is villain acts after every 2 hero cards, which speeds up the pace of the game, gives the villains more turns as we go, and puts more pressure on the player to get moving and try to be a little more proactive in getting rid of that main villain. You see we've got the 2, well, I guess if you count Bob the Hydra agent, we've got 3 other villains on the table as threat cards. There's Madam Hydra, so she's got 5 health, so each of the threat card villains are going to have their own health that we'll have to deal with as we go. We've got Crossbones, and we've got Hydra Agent Bob, which I would have thought he would have come in the Deadpool set, but nope, he's here in the core set. So then we've got challenge cards, which we don't need for this game because those are merely there to increase the difficulty. If you were around previously, I said that the game actually has 4 levels of difficulty that you can play at, so you can adjust it as you go using these challenge cards. But as this is my first single player playthrough, we're going to stick with the newbie game today. And luckily for me, this game has no dice rolling, so I'm not doomed from the very beginning as I was with G.I. Joe. Alright, so that should be our complete game setup as per the instruction booklet. It looks fairly similar. So all we have to do now is place our characters. I want to double check there's no main starting point for the characters. All we really need to do is put the villain on 1 space. So, I don't know, Central Park seems like a good spot for Red Skull to start out. And then the 3 heroes actually go directly opposite him on the table. Okay. So, in the single player game, we're playing the Shield solo mode. So that's a 3-player setup, but instead of me playing each character, I play the Shield controller that commands them on the missions and sends them into combat. So I get to play any of the hero cards in my hand instead of just 1, which means at the beginning of the game I draw 3 of each hero card and basically have a 9-card hand that I can play from as we go. Whichever card I play at any time makes that hero active. Any effects that refer to another player refer only to me, and any effect that refers to you refers only to whoever the active character is, which is, as I said, determined by which card I played. And if I'm ever KO'd, I lose immediately, which means if I discard the last hand from my hand, I'm immediately KO'd. So if I don't have any of one character's card, they're KO'd until the next turn. If I don't have any of any character's cards in my turn, then we're fully KO'd. And that's a loss. So hopefully it's not going to come down to that. So instead, we will go ahead and launch into this game using those rules and hope that we don't have any issues winning like we did last time, because, well, I honestly haven't won a board game in a long time. But we'll see what happens today, and hopefully I can break that streak. So the first thing we're going to do is draw my 3 hero cards from each deck. 3 Hulk, 3 Cap, 3 Iron Man. So I got 3 move. You know what? There's a good chance I should probably shuffle those. So let's shuffle them up a little bit and start over. Didn't realize there were so many copies of different cards in those decks, and that for all intents and purposes, this game is essentially brand new for me. So I'll shuffle those up and try again. Shuffle my Iron Man and draw 3 of those. While I'm doing this, I'll mention that I stopped by one of my local game stores today and picked up some new games from their consignment shelf that I'll be able to use for the stream as well, including Star Wars Imperial Assault, Arkham Horror, the card game, a game based on Gerard Way's Umbrella Academy comic, and Mage Knight. So a couple of additional options, and I think I'll be posting a list of all the options I have available on YouTube in the community section, and if anybody has preferences or wants to vote on anything or make a request, you'll be able to see what's available there, and I'll see what I can do. Alright, so now I've got some more randomized cards. Let's see what we have. My Iron Man cards, I have one with a couple of wild options. Remember, anything that comes with the 3 colored icon is a wild action, so this card is 2 wild actions. This card is 2 special actions, and this card is 1 move and 1 special action. So for Captain America, I have a move and an attack, 2 attacks, and 2 specials. And for Hulk, I have 2 attacks, 2 wild, and 1 move. But this move has a special ability on it, so it says deal 1 damage to everything else in this location and discard all of the civilians there. So great. Hulk's got a collateral damage ability. Not really awesome, but not maybe the worst thing in the game. So one thing I forgot to do during the setup is put health tokens on each of the villains that are up there. So that's how we keep track of how much damage we've done to the villains and how close they are to being defeated as we go, is by removing health tokens until they get down to 0, at which point we can discard them and unveil that location's special ability, which grant us benefits throughout the game. So I've got 5 for Madam Hydra, 4 for Bob, and 6 for Crossbones. so now that those are tracked, we can go ahead and get this game rolling. See if the Avengers can take down the Red Skull. So normally in the storyline, each card can use the abilities from the previous card as options on that turn. The only time that doesn't apply is on your first turn because, well, you don't have a previous card to use. So I think for this first turn, we just double check. Make sure the heroes go first instead of the villains. But I'm relatively certain that the heroes go first in this game. So, yep. By saying that I am relatively certain, that of course means that I'm absolutely wrong. And the villain goes first, so I guess that makes sense. Heroes in comics are generally more reactive than proactive, so that works well enough. So in this case, Red Skull gives one space on the villainous plot fear track. He gives +2 civilians on the card that he's standing on, which is indicated by this center bit here. So that center bit means +2 civilians on that card, and then +1 civilian on each adjacent card. The 1 up here means +1 on his fear track, and the BAM means to activate BAM skill. So you can see here in the book that the BAM skill is on the dashboard. So Red Skull's BAM is to deal 1 damage to each hero in Red Skull's location and increase the fear track by 2. Oops, sorry about that. That 1 is actually a move. Red Skull gets to move 1 space and then activate the BAM and then employ those new civilians. So let's move Red Skull over to Shield headquarters. Activate his BAM, so that increases the fear track by 2. Then we deal 1 damage to each hero, which damage to heroes is generally discarding cards. Hi Game Dude, what's up? And then we will add the new civilians that this calls for to the locations that Red Skull is on and those directly adjacent to him. So you'll see that, well, you might not see on those up there, but you'll see here on Shield headquarters and Stark Labs that each of those locations are now filled. All of their slots on those are filled up, which means from now on, when Red Skull plays another card, if it adds more villain thugs or civilians to those locations, then his overflow ability goes into effect. And overflow is an additional rule that can change the parameters. In this case, if a token can't be added to a location, increase the fear track by 1 for each token you couldn't add. So rather than adding more thugs and more civilians, he increases his fear track and gets closer to winning the game. So that would be a bad thing. And then, as that turn is now done, we can pretty much call it a day on the villain and move along to our hero card. Again, we want to make sure that we start clearing off those submissions as quickly as possible, because That's the only way we're going to win, is to go ahead and defeat Red Skull. And I can't even attack him until we get at least 2 of the submissions cleared. You see that above each of the submission cards, there is a set of rules. So first card is villain acts after every 2 cards. So instead of 3 to 1, we become a 2 to 1. Second rule is that the villain is now vulnerable. So once that second submission is defeated, then we can start going directly after Red Skull. And the third one is each hero immediately draws 1 card. So clearing the submissions in no way beats or results in a win for the overall game. They're just additional abilities and capabilities that we get as we go. So now we get to go ahead and move along with all of our hero turns. I just wanted to double check the hero damage. Heroes usually take damage when attacked by the villains or henchmen due to activated BAM effects. For each damage the hero takes, they must discard 1 card from their hands, placing it on the bottom of their deck. So that's what I thought. So I'll try to be fair about this and randomize which ones I lose. Fortunately, I've got a terrible memory and I have no idea what any of them were. So let's just do the middle one from each. Put those at the bottom of my hero decks. And see what we're left with to go into the next turn. So I am left with a move and 2 attacks for the Hulk, 2 specials, a move and attack for Captain America, a move and special, and 2 wilds for Iron Man. So I think that my best bet here may be, because I'm on Avengers Tower, there are no civilians there for me, or no thugs there for me to be able to defeat and send to my defeat thug submission. I could try to rescue a civilian, or I could attack and try to defeat Madam Hydra. Defeating Madam Hydra may be my best option because I have enough to do that on this first round, and doing so will thanks game, appreciate it. Doing so will mean less hurdles for me to overcome later in the game, and by clearing her off right away, I unlock whatever the special ability for Avengers Tower is, which in this case, at the end of the turn, you may search your deck for 1 card and set it aside, then shuffle your deck and place the card on top. So I can kind of influence my next hand draw by using the ability on Avengers Tower. So to get rid of thugs are basically 1 hit point, so you can make a single attack and clear a single thug token off of any location. Or you can rescue civilians, and rescuing civilians requires a heroic action. So like right here with Captain America, we could do 2 heroic actions if there were 2 civilians and rescue them both. But you get to take 1 action on your turn, once per symbol available in any order. So that would mean that we usually have 3 or 4 symbols available because we get to use actions off of the previous cards in the storyline. And that means that having Hulk attack first means that we could do 2 damage to Madam Hydra. And then we can use Captain America to get the benefit of Hulk's 2 attacks to do 3 additional attacks and 1 move, so Captain America can start moving around the board. And then I can use Iron Man to rescue 1 civilian from Avengers Tower and move that civilian onto my rescue civilian's submission card and start working on clearing that submission out. So once you've done 3 actions with your heroes, then your villain draws from their master plan deck, and they get to progress their attempts at taking over the world. So for this card, Red Skull gets to move 2 spaces. He gets to do his BAM action, and then he adds 2 thugs to the card he lands on, or location he lands on, and 1 thug to each adjacent location. So I probably don't want to go confront the Avengers. So I'll move him his 2 spaces to the helicarrier, activate his BAM ability, which does 1 damage to each of my heroes, and that means I discard all 3 of these cards. And progress the fear track by 2. And then we get to add 4 thugs to the board. 2 at the location he's at, so there's 1. I don't have any more room on that location, so we'll look at the location he's at there. I have no more room at the location that he's at, which means his overflow effect goes into play. Overflow meaning that for each civilian or thug that I couldn't add, the fear track increases by 1. So out of the 2, I couldn't add 1 of them. And then we do 1 thug to each adjacent location. So 1 thug here, and 1 thug here, which again, we have no room to add another thug. So again, that fear track increases by 1. So next up, back to our heroes. The only thing that I don't remember is how does their each time 3 heroes, a new master plan card is drawn. It's kind of not clear about how the players refill their deck. So that's the one rule errata that I was not clear on going into this, and I still do not see. Each player chooses a hero plays. You would think that that would be listed in the turn order. Oh, sorry, there it is. We draw 1 card. So each hero draws 1 card from the top of their deck at the beginning of their turn, which kind of limits my options, being that I was out of cards for having taken 2 damage in those first 2 villain rounds, which also kind of... Oh, never mind. See, I messed up. Reading is fundamental, kids. I should have only taken damage from the Red Skull if he were in my location. So, because he was not on one of the locations of any of my heroes, I actually shouldn't have discarded any cards. Good job, me. Apparently, if I've learned anything so far doing this stream, I'm bad at reading what's on the table in front of me. I forget that quickly, kind of with the reserve on the G.I. Joe deck building game. I completely forgot about that on every single turn, as it were. But I think we're back on track now, so let's go ahead and get back into it. So I drew back the cards that I'd accidentally discarded and have a decent hand, which is good because I was worried there with only 1 card for each character and playing 3 cards on the hero turn. I was about to lose the game on turn 2, and that made me a little curious about whether or not I was doing things right. Which, as it turns out, I was not. So looking down at the storyline, we'll go ahead and... Oops. Madam Hydra was defeated, so I can pull her off of the Avengers Tower. There you go. She's been removed, and now I have the Avengers Tower special bonus of searching my deck for one card and setting it aside. But I don't want to stay on Avengers Tower because there's really nothing left there for me to do. So instead, I will use Captain America to move one space. I will use Iron Man to move one space using the previous card. So Captain America's movement benefits Iron Man, to put him over here into the Stark Labs. And I will follow that up with a 2 wild card to rescue the 2 civilians that are in Stark Labs right now, and add them to my rescue civilian submission. And last but not least, I will use Hulk's 2 attacks to move one space, use 2 attacks to clear off 2 thugs, and add those to the defeat thugs submission, and then use Iron Man's 2... Whoops. I only used the previous card, so I did 1 move, 2 attacks. I can do 1 more action based on Iron Man's wild power. So I will do 1 more action to attack Crossbones and remove one of his health counters. And then we're done with my hero turn, and it's the villain's turn again. So this time we've got no movement for Red Skull. We've got the BAM, which in this instance does damage my Captain America because he's on the same space. So I will discard one of my Captain America cards. And then he does the Hydra Insurgency, which says for each crisis token the heroes have, advance the fear track by 1. But we don't have any crisis tokens yet, so nothing we really have to worry about. But if I draw that same card later, or something with the same idea behind it, then might be a little bit more of an issue for us. So I drew my 3 new cards, 1 for each character. I got a single attack with a special ability for Iron Man. So that one distributes 2 moves. I'm sorry, not moves. Yeah, moves. Need better glasses apparently. From the pool among any heroes. So essentially using his tech to move heroes around. I got a Captain America with a move and an attack. And I got Hulk with a wild. So, Captain America, let's start with him. So he's up here with Red Skull and the Shield Helicarrier. I'll use his card that has 1 move and 1 attack. And I will take out one of the thugs to add to the submission. And move him along the board. Remember, I can't attack the Red Skull yet because I have to complete 2 submissions before I can. And so it doesn't really do me any good to stand on the same space as Red Skull unless I want to keep taking a beating every time he gets an attack action. So next, we'll go ahead and use 2 wild for the Hulk. And I'll move Hulk here and use one of his attack actions for the second wild to clear the Thug off of this card. So Hulk has moved over to the shield headquarters and cleared a Thug off of that. And lastly, we will use Hulk also gets an additional move. Oh, so, see, this is where the planning comes in and paying attention. So Hulk had 2 wild, but he also had Captain America's 1 move and attack. So I can move once, attack to clear the Thug, but then I can use Hulk's 2 wild cards to perform heroic action and rescue 2 more civilians. And then I can take an Iron Man card, move Iron Man 1 space, rescue a civilian using one of Hulk's wilds, and use Hulk's second wild to move 1 additional space. Right, so that is all 3 of my hero turns. And now the villain gets to advance his nefarious schemes some more. In this instance, by moving 4 spaces, activating his BAM, and adding thugs to the card he lands on and both adjacent cards. So moving 4 spaces, either direction will put him over in Stark Labs. Activating his BAM will up my track 2 more spaces. And then adding thugs means 2 thugs here on Stark Labs and 1 on each the Shield Helicarrier and Avengers Tower. So these keep replenishing as we go. And then, because I'm really good at memory-based things, I've been forgetting to do the end of turn actions on each location as I've moved around the board. Like for the Shield headquarters that the Hulk's in right now, the conflict there is heroes in this and adjacent locations take 1 crisis token each. So we have our crisis tokens over here, and with some really excellent planning on my part, I have all of my heroes adjacent to that space, so they all take a crisis token. And then because I've got heroes up here in the Central Park location, I get to discard all thugs and civilians from this location and advance the fear track by the number of tokens discarded this way, which again, due to my excellent planning, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was a painful turn. If I'd been paying attention to those, I probably would have tried to clear them out earlier and not suffered that much of an advance along the fear track. But lesson learned. So I guess I'm kind of behind the curve right now as far as how I'm doing against Red Skull. But let's go ahead and draw my 3 new hero cards. See if I can start making some progress against that. And the other thing is, I can also, the first turn is the only time I don't get the benefit of the previously played hero card. So even if there is a villain card between the previously played and the latest hero card, I still get the benefit of using the previous one as well. So I will go ahead and use Hulk for a wild action to defeat this thug. And I get 1 movement, so I'll move back to Stark Labs. Then I will use a Captain America card to take 2 attack actions against the thugs in the Central Park location and add those to my defeat thug side mission. And then I have a wild card action for Hulk's previous card, so I will use that to do a heroic action on the conflict there. And once I've done 3 heroic actions and met the requirements of that conflict card, I can remove it from that space. And then lastly, I will use an Iron Man card that has a special ability, because all I have available right now with Iron Man are attacks, but if I use this card I get to distribute his 2 move tokens to any number of heroes. So I can distribute 2 move tokens to myself, or Iron Man in this case, and move him someplace where his and Captain America's attacks will actually benefit me. So if I move him over to here with Bob, then I can use 3 attacks against Bob and knock him down to a single health, which should theoretically put me in a better position for the next turn. And now let's see what kind of damage Red Skull gets to do. So no moves, but at this point he gets to discard all of the civilians from locations with heroes and deal 1 damage to each of those heroes. Advance the fear track by the number of civilians discarded this way. Sorry, I don't know why it's not focusing. There you go. So I get to remove all of the civilians from each of these locations. So both civilians from Times Square, only spaces occupied by heroes. 3 civilians from Central Park, and there are no civilians where Hulk is. So I do 1 damage to each hero that I remove that way, so I've only got 1 Iron Man card left, which, once that's removed, means Iron Man is KO'd, so he can't do anything this next turn. I do 1 damage to Captain America, which I have 1 Captain America card. So Captain America is KO'd and can't do anything this next turn. And nothing happened to Hulk because, well, Hulk was not on a space with any civilians. Unfortunately, I removed 5 total civilians, so I advanced the fear track 2, 3, 4, 5. And I am really close to losing. But like I said, I haven't won a board game in forever. So now I enact the end of turn cards at each location that my heroes are at. So first I enact end of turn for Times Square. Bob's end of turn criteria is heroes starting their turn in this location take 1 crisis token, but Iron Man's KO'd, so it doesn't really matter. I have the end of turn criteria for Central Park, which says discard all of the thugs and civilians and increase the fear track by the number discarded. But I don't have any thugs or civilians on that space, fortunately. And lastly, where the Hulk is, we have Crossbones, deal 2 damage to each hero in this location. Any hero can prevent this effect by taking 2 crisis tokens. So if I were to let the effect come into play, I have 2 Hulk cards left, and the 2 damage would remove both of them from my hand, and that would be game over. So instead, I'm going to go ahead and take 2 crisis tokens for Hulk and activate the BAM action based on Crossbones' end of turn criteria. BAM does 1 damage, so I discard 1 of my Hulk cards. And oh, hey, look, increase the fear track by 2. Well, that puts the fear track at 20, meaning, yeah, par for the course. I lost this one again. Sorry, everyone, but the Red Skull has defeated the Avengers, at least under my watch. But that's kind of how it's been going for me. I was hoping I'd get better. Well, shouldn't be that tough, Slinky. But I'm hoping I get better at these games as we go along. However, since that went so quickly once we got it set up, what do you say we restart and see if I can run through it quickly to see if we can get a better outcome. I'll even swap out the Avengers so that we're using a whole different set. Because apparently Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man, they're just not tough enough to get the job done. Actually, let's not do that. Let's go ahead and swap over, and we'll see if the X-Men can be any tougher than the Avengers against their villains. I'm just going to clear this real quick, and then pull out the X-Men set, and we'll take another run at this. Maybe do a little better next time. Be nice to win one game at some point. Alright, so moving on. Let's see what happens when we look at the X-Men instead of the Avengers. So for this game, I'll let you all decide. I agree, Slinky. I've always been more of an X-Men fan than an Avengers fan. But for this game, I'll leave it all up to you. Who do we want as the villain? Choices are Sabretooth, focus, Juggernaut, Magneto. If you missed the stream where I talked about the introduction, the rules, the reason Magneto and Mystique are purple is because they're anti-heroes. You can actually use them either as heroes or villains. So, oh, did he? That bodes well for me, I'm sure. I'm not sure if you can see the chat on stream, but Blunderbutt just said that Sabretooth destroyed him in his first playthrough against him, so. Juggernaut? Is everybody good with Juggernaut? We can go ahead and play against him. He's always been an easy villain in the comics. Why wouldn't I have an easy time with him in the board game, right? Alright, so we'll go with Juggernaut. And then, which 3 X-Men do we want to pick? We got our choice between Beast, Cyclops, Wolverine, Storm, Professor X, and Jean Grey. I assume, being a modern X-Men playthrough, we always have to have Wolverine, because Marvel insists, well, that's Beast, because Marvel insists that he be in everything, so We'll do Wolverine. We'll do... Always been partial to Jean Grey, so let's do Jean Grey. And because he gets so much hate and nobody else seems to like him, let's give poor old Cyclops a chance here too. I've always been a Cyclops fan. I don't know why people are so down on him. But we'll set up our villain dashboard. Get the Juggernaut in play here. Grab our hero decks for Wolverine. Jean Grey. And Scott Summers. And lastly, grab Juggernaut's villain deck out here. I refuse to call it a master plan for Juggernaut because, let's be honest, the guy's not really a master plan type villain. So there's my 3 submission cards. And then we need our locations. So locations for this game are going to be, shuffle those up a little bit. The Weapon X facility, the X-Jet, the Asteroid M. Asteroid M. What a nice 90s location for an X-Men confrontation. We have Genosha. Hey, there's another good 90s one. Didn't Genosha first appear in, what was it, Executioner's Song? Is that the storyline that Genosha first popped up in? We've got Muir Island, so home of Moira McTaggart, and for a while Excalibur. I don't know where they're based out of now. All of my comic knowledge is rooted in the 90s and never really made it out of there. And we have the Xavier Institute. So those will be our locations for this particular playthrough. Let's get these decks shuffled up some. Don't need those villain cards anymore. Take my starting hand of 3 Wolverine. Oh, in this set, some of the cards are actually labeled as starting hands, so take my starting hand card and 2 additional cards for Wolverine. Shuffle up Jean. None of Jean's cards say starting hand, so just draw my top 3 Jean cards. And get a little Cyclops going here. I didn't see any starting hand indicators on Cyclops either, so we'll draw 3 Cyclops cards. I think the reason Wolverine had a starting hand indicator on his card is because it's his healing factor card. So as long as it's in the storyline, have less than 3 cards in hand at the end of a villain turn, I can draw a card. So there's his regeneration. You beat my full house with your 3 bubs. Well, yeah, I don't really have any counter for that. I don't know what the defense against a bub is, so I know what a defense against a bud is, at least various buds, like Bud the Chud or, you know. No, I got the joke, I just don't know how to respond to it. So, I'm backpedaling 10. Alright. So the other thing that I forgot to set up was the threat tokens on each of my starting locations, so I'll make sure to do that this time around. Just going to use the same tokens from the Avengers so I don't pour another set out on my desk, table, whatever this thing is. Set up my initial thugs and or civilians, which these are two-sided, so they're thugs on one side, civilians on the other side, so means less sorting through your pieces, which is always nice. We can pretend that Asteroid M is representative of Fatal Attractions, which is one of my favorite 90s X-Men storylines, where Wolverine got his adamantium ripped out. And all of the 6 main tie-in issues for that storyline had those awesome holograms on the covers, so I'll put my threats in place on each location randomly. I will go ahead and assign Juggernaut to a starting space, which, oh yeah, I forgot in the failed pilot they went to Asteroid M, didn't they? That was a good pilot, except for Australian Wolverine. I could have done without him. But we ended up with Australian Wolverine in the movies anyway, I guess, didn't we? Alright, so for our starting position, seems like every other time Juggernaut appears, he's destroying the X-Mansion, so let's go ahead and start him in the Institute. And we'll start the X-Men down in the Weapon X facility. So notice that for Juggernaut, he doesn't have any threat cards that are other villains. He's only got threat cards that are various functions of the Cyttorak crystal. So I guess that's the game's way of saying he's just running around causing destruction. But that's all of our initial setup. Oh, I did say that I would remember to put the threat tokens on the cards this time, right? So let me grab threat tokens. Because we need those for tracking the mission. So each starting location gets a threat token. That is cleared out once we meet the conditions on each of the cards. So it looks like we've got the setup done. Now we can go ahead and jump in and maybe try to actually win this one. I'm not holding my breath at this point. But Juggernaut's going to kick things off, so yeah, I can actually move these up a little bit. Before we start running with Juggernaut, let's take a quick look at his card here. He has a special rule that when a hero's KO'd, Juggernaut doesn't activate his BAM. Instead, he draws another Master Plan card to add face down to the storyline. His BAM is to deal 1 damage to each hero in locations that Juggernaut's in or moved through this turn, because nothing stops the Juggernaut. Now, Game Dude, I haven't watched it yet. People in the Discord server had enough to say about it that I haven't really been in a hurry. So his BAM is to deal 1 damage to anybody in locations that Juggernaut left, entered, or moved through. And then his overflow ability is to deal 1 damage to each hero in Juggernaut's location for every token removed, or every token that wasn't able to be played in overflow. There we go. And to draw another Master Plan card and add it face down to the storyline. So those are Juggernaut's abilities. And you can see that all of his threats on the entire board, each of them has 3 heroic actions as the clear criteria. So I'm going to be needing a lot of those as I go along. So Juggernaut will start us out with a card from his Master Plan deck, which allows him to move 2 spaces. Let's put him down in Genosha. Allows him to activate his BAM. And then if any Avatar of Cyberdrac threat cards have been cleared, I get to put 1 of them back into play in the next counterclockwise location. So his threats come in 2 flavors. There are 3 Power of Cyberdrac. I'm sorry, 2 Power of Cyberdrac, 2 Seal of Cyberdrac, and 2 Avatars of Cyberdrac. The Avatar say as long as 1 or more Avatar of Cyberdrac is in play, Juggernaut ignores 1 damage each hero turn. The Power of Cyberdrac says when taking damage, heroes in this location take an extra damage. And the Seal of Cyberdrac says if a hero starts their turn in this location, treat any special effects on their cards as blank this turn. So that's kind of powerful, but at least we don't have to defeat sub-villains in any of the locations for this one. So his first turn, he moved his 2 spaces, he activates his BAM. So his BAM is deal 1 damage to each hero in the location Juggernaut left, entered, or moved through. I didn't have anybody in any of those, so we don't have to worry about it. And then the special ability is if any Avatar or Cyberdrac threat cards have been cleared, which they haven't, so we can ignore that. So nothing too painful on first turn. Which means we get to move on with our hero turns. And we'll start that by using 2 attacks with Jean and clearing 2 thugs from the Weapon X facility. Whoops, I forgot the end of turn for the threat. So the threat card here is as long as 1 or more Avatar, Juggernaut ignores the damage, so nothing that really affects us yet. But Jean will attack, take off those 2 thugs. Then we'll go ahead and use a wild for Wolverine to move over here. I guess it doesn't matter where he moves. We'll have him move up here And nope. I'll have him move over here because all he can do is attack using those abilities from Jean. Which means I chose poorly. Let's not use Wolverine on that. It's my game. I can go back in time if I want. Besides, I'm sure the X-Men would figure out a way to do that anyway. So instead of Wolverine, let's go ahead and use 2 wild cards for Cyclops to move to do 1 special ability damage to this Avatar of Cyttorak, to move 1 space, to attack 1 thug, and then there's not really much else he can do with that extra wildcard damage. So now we can use Wolverine, and with another wildcard we can actually do 2 heroic ability attacks on this Avatar of Cyttorak down here. So that gives that the 3 that we need to clear it. Meaning 1 Avatar of Cyttorak's out of play, 1 threat is cleared, goes on our clear threats submission. And then I have 1 more wild left, so I will go ahead and move Wolverine 1 space to kind of scatter our X-Men out a little bit. That makes me done with this first hero turn, so time for the Juggernaut to go again. This time Juggernaut gets to again move 2 spaces, do 1 BAM action, and if any Avatar of Cyttorak threat, put 1 of them back in the next clockwise location without a threat. So it says if any of these have been cleared, to put it back in play in the next clockwise position without a threat, which would be the same position I just cleared it from and left. At least I'm assuming. That's how I read it. But we get to do the BAM. Well, let's move him 2 spaces first. I feel he would continue around in a circle, meaning he gets to do 1 damage to each hero in the locations he left, entered, and went through. So that means all 3 of my X-Men take a damage from old Kane Marco there. And I'll get rid of 1 of each of their cards. I re-added the Cyttorak, so done with that. But none of his conflict cards or threat cards do really anything to me at the end of the turn. So I guess I can just go ahead and draw, and we'll get on with the X-Men's next turn. So let's start this turn with, well, I have not a whole lot of choices for heroic actions, but I can swap the previous hero card in the lineup with any other hero cards in the lineup if I use Jean's telepathy. So we go ahead and use that one, and instead of Wolverine's 1 wild, I'll swap it with Cyclops' 2 wild. And that will allow me to move 1 space and rescue 2 civilians, which seems like a very Jean Grey thing to do, as long as she's not all Phoenix-y at the moment. All right. Then I will play a Wolverine card with a heroic action, so I can perform a heroic action to rescue the civilian from the X-Jet space that Wolverine's currently on, and put a heroic action marker on that particular Avatar of Cyttorak. And because that's the healing factor card. The special text on it reads, as long as it's in play, as long as it's face up in the storyline, if I have less than 3 cards in my hand, which means less than 3 Wolverine cards because it refers specifically to him, at the end of the villain turn I draw a card. So it makes it a little harder to knock Wolverine out. But lastly, instead of using any Cyclops, I guess I have to use a Cyclops card. If I use another Jean Grey card, then she's KO'd, which I know in the comics she's used her powers hard enough to knock herself out, but I don't think I need to roleplay that this hard. Unfortunately, it doesn't really matter what I play because all I have are attacks for Cyclops. So I'll play 1 Cyclops card, attack nothing, and then use Wolverine's heroic action to put a heroic action marker on this particular threat. And now it's time for the Juggernaut to go stomping through again. But here's Juggernaut's turn. Move to the next counterclockwise location with the most heroes, which puts him in Genosha. Unstoppable charge, deal 1 damage to each hero in Juggernaut's location. Which means Jean and Scott are both going to be KO'd for this next turn. And lastly, add a thug and a civilian to each of the adjacent locations that Juggernaut ended up on. So I'll add a thug and a civilian to Muir Island. I'll add a thug and a civilian to the Weapon X facility. And now it's my next turn, which means all I'm drawing is a single Wolverine card because Scott and Jean are both knocked out. Things aren't going so well for me again this game, but you know, what are you going to do, right? So I will go ahead and play that card to actually, no, I don't remember. I gotta check that in the rules to see. With heroes with multiple signature attacks, you have to. Yeah, exactly. There's no kind of special abilities in the game unless it's the special text on a particular card 10. So each hero is going to have maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 cards in their deck that'll give them a chance to do special abilities. But that's the only way they can execute anything that's not a standard attack, heroic action, or a move action. Which kind of takes away some of those unique aspects of these particular characters. Yeah. In a later stream, I have the X-Men's Mutant Insurrection game that has a lot more variety of mutant powers and some new options. So KO, if a hero discards the last card from their hand, they're immediately KO'd. Lay down that hero's game piece. Must be ignored by all effects and immediately resolve the BAM listed on the villain dashboard, not those on any henchman threat cards. This could cause another hero to be KO'd, creating a chain reaction, blah blah blah. Start of a KO'd hero's next turn, their piece is placed back upright. During the draw, they draw up to 4 cards from their deck. Okay, so it sounds like KO is not really much of a problem for us, right? Because they're only KO'd for the villain turn. So I guess that means I do get to draw redraw their hero decks up to 4 cards. That's pretty handy. And now they're back in play, I guess, because this is now the hero turn. Alright, well, I will go ahead and use a Scott card to do 2 heroic attacks. One with his icon, one with one of the wild icons from Wolverine's previous card, to remove this Power of Cyttorak threat and gain another threat token onto my submission. Yeah, exactly. So, very comic accurate. Jean was gone for half an issue before coming back to life. And then I have one move and one more wild from Wolverine's wild card from the previous round, so I will go ahead and use that to save one of the civilians in Muir Island. And then I can do a Jean Grey action, so let's go ahead and we'll do a wild card action for Jean. We have one move from her previous action, so I'll have her move to the Weapon X facility, use her wild and her heroic action, wild as an attack to get rid of this one thug, heroic action to rescue this one civilian, and now it's Juggernaut's turn again. So, this time, Juggernaut, I really didn't shuffle that well, did I? Move to the next location clockwise to meet that has the most heroes, so he's going to go up against Scott here in Muir Island, because it is my next location that has any heroes. He also does 1 damage to each hero in Juggernaut's location, so I discard one of Scott's cards here. And then just like last time, he adds a civilian and a thug to each adjacent location. Oh, that was close. We almost went to overflow on Xavier's school, but not quite. So, X-Men's turn again. Let's see if we can keep going, because I feel we've got decent momentum this time, at least. Draw back up my hero decks. Also, if you run out of cards in your hero decks, then yeah, you lose the game that way too. So I will use Cyclops card, 2 heroic actions, and Jean's previous wild card. I'll do 3 heroic actions on the Seal of Cyttorak on the Muir Island location to clear that one off and get another threat token added to my Clear Threats mission. I will go ahead and move Wolverine. There's a special ability for you, 10. It's Adamantium Claws. It gives Wolverine 2 attacks on this turn, which would be, in this case, 1 move, 2 heroic actions, so 1 to rescue a civilian, 1 to mark this threat, and then because of his Adamantium Claws, he gets the 2 attacks, which I can only use 1, but I'll clear that thug. And last but not least, for Jean, I can just use this one to do 2 heroic actions, put 2 markers on this threat, and move 1 space, so I'll put her over here on the X-Jet, and we'll let Juggernaut go one more time. This time Juggernaut gets 4 moves. He gets to activate his he gets 4 moves, he gets to activate his BAM, and then he's putting 2 thugs on whatever card he lands on, and 1 on each of the adjacent location cards. So 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. He does his BAM damage, so he left Mir Island, and he went through Asteroid M and the X-Jet, so he does 1 damage to each of my characters, because he touched on all of them that turn. That's my last Wolverine card, which would normally KO him, but because his healing factors face up in the storyline, if you have less than 3 cards in hand at the end of a villain turn, you may draw 1 card. So I honestly should have drawn a card last time, and that would have saved me from being KO'd this time, because I have 2 and can discard 1 of them. And then 4 thugs get put into play. 2 on the location that Juggernaut's currently on, and 1 on each adjacent location. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope. How about I actually put them on Juggernaut spaces? Alright, there we go. And now it's the X-Men's turn again. So draw my hero decks back up. And we will start with let's see. Looks like maybe we've got 2 heroic actions for Jean. So let's do 2 heroic actions to clear this card, meaning I get to clear this submission because that was my 4th threat, which is going to increase the speed of the game because now we're on a 2-to-1 pace, so I only get to take 2 hero actions before the villain gets to take their action. But then I get 1 move, so I'll move Jean onto the same space as Juggy, and 1 more heroic action on Jean's turn. So I will use that to clear off this other avatar of Cyttorak. And fortunately not have any of those left to have to deal with. Then for our second action this turn, I will use a Wolverine Wild. That will allow me to move Wolverine over to the Xavier Institute, using Jean's move action from her last turn. 1 wild to remove I'll use it as a heroic action to save a civilian, and then 1 other heroic action from Jean's previous turn to save another civilian. And now, that means if I use a heroic action from Scott on Mir Island, sorry, I'm not giving anybody motion sickness with that. If I use a heroic action with Scott on Mir Island, well, I've got 2 wilds, so 1 heroic action to save a civilian, meaning I've completed that mission, which makes the Juggernaut vulnerable, and then 1 heroic action or 1 wild to attack, which means it's Juggernaut's turn, but now I can start hammering on him and see if I can actually win this game. This time Juggy gets to move 4 spaces, activate his BAM, and put on civilians on his final location and the 2 adjacent locations. So Take Juggernaut, 1, 2, 3, 4. Uses BAM, so... Oops, I forgot to draw a Wolverine card because of his healing factor. Juggy uses BAM, so Scott's KO'd. And then 1 card each for Jean and Wolverine because of the 1 damage he dealt on his BAM. And then civilians placed 2 in his current location and 1 in each adjacent location. Draw my hero deck back up, including 4 for Scott, who is waking up again from being trounced. And let's see if we can start getting anything done against the Juggernaut. Well, I have a pretty worthless draw that time, but I can at least use this card with Scott's leadership ability to give an extra wild power to any of my other X-Men, so I'll give that to Jean. And then I will use... that doesn't help me at all. I'll give that to Wolverine, that wild card. And then Scott's got another wild, so try to get him closer to Juggernaut. Then I will play a Wolverine card with an attack and a move to allow Wolvie to move here, do 1 attack against Juggernaut, and a 2nd attack because of the wild that Scott gave him, which 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We won't do 7 and 8 because Wolvie just took 2 health off of him. And hey, that's the first time ever I've actually hit a bad guy in this game. So, if nothing else, I count that as a partial win. And then I will use a move card for Jean. Move her here. Use Wolverine's attack. Clear off 1 thug. Now it's time for Juggy to go again. 3 spaces. You know what? How many of these have I played? And I just now noticed the arrow on it and didn't really make the connection that indicates whether or not the villain moves clockwise or counterclockwise. This is true, 10, but don't you need a Spider-Man to coach you? But, I mean, you need a Shatterstar sword to sever the laces on his helmet. And I know that was step 1. I don't really remember what they did after that, but I know that Spider-Man taught X-Force in issue 4, I think, how to defeat Juggernaut, because he was mad Juggernaut dropped a building on him. So, that was a fun issue. But we'll move Juggy 1, 2, 3 spaces counterclockwise, which does 1 damage to Scott. Again, I mean, this is very realistic to the X-Men comics because Scott's a punching bag in this game. He does his BAM, so that was the 1 damage that he did to Scott, and then he puts 4 thug tokens, 2 on his current location, 1 on each adjacent location. And it's the X-Men's turn again. So I realized one of the things that makes Juggernaut difficult in this game is that he's always moving, and therefore my characters always have to play catch-up with him. But that's no fun. So for this one, I will go ahead and play a Gene Wild. So, not Gene Wilder, but Gene Wild. To move 1 space and use my Wild to attack a thug. I will use a Wolverine attack. And Jean's Wild to move Wolverine over to the X Mansion and attack one thug, clearing off that last submission and allowing me to draw another card for every hero, which makes it far less likely that Scott's going to be KO'd again this very next turn. And lastly, don't have many options for Scott right now, so I'll use a move and try to catch him up to the Juggernaut. But Juggernaut's on the run again, 3 spaces counterclockwise, or I'm sorry, clockwise this time, a BAM, and add civilians. So, 1, 2, 3. BAM means he does 1 damage. Oh, I forgot to draw another card for Wolverine because of his healing factor. BAM means he does a damage to each character that he passed, so 1 Wolverine damage and 1 Cyclops damage. And then he's adding civilians, which, because there are no missions for the civilians left anymore, you'd think didn't really mean much, but we want to keep adding them when it tells us to because of the overflow effect on Juggernaut's card. So even when that mission's cleared. Waco Kid. Why don't I remember Waco Kid? Is he one of the Marvel Western characters? Isn't there a new Waco Kid that's like a female gunslinger? Why am I thinking that's a true statement? Oh yeah, that makes a lot more sense. But his shooting hand is so unsteady. Alright. Let's see. What can we actually do against the Juggernaut this turn? Well, I can use... Oh, this is a good one. Finally. I'm going to use Scott's move from his previous card to move Wolverine 1 space. And then, because I played Adamantium Claws, Wolverine gets to go ham on Juggernaut for 3 damage. Which means he's down to just 3 right now, which is pretty great. So I will use a 2 wild card for Jean. Move her up to Juggy's location and use the attack on Wolverine's previous turn to do another damage to Juggernaut. And last but not least, I will use a single attack for Scott to use Jean's previous 2 wild to move him over and do 1 more attack on Juggernaut, bringing Juggernaut down to a single hit point, which is the closest I've been to winning in a long time. And having said that, I probably just cursed myself. We will see. Juggernaut gets to move 2 spaces counterclockwise and add 4 new thugs to the board. 1, 2. Oh, I forgot to draw my Wolverine card for his healing factor. But, hey look, Scott's KO'd again. 1 damage to Jean. 1 damage to Wolverine. And 2 thugs to the space he landed on. A thug to Genosha, which is overflow damage, means 1 damage to each hero in Juggernaut's location, which really doesn't affect me right now, and 1 thug to the Xavier Institute. Get to draw my hand back up. Oops. Scott's gone for good the next time I run out of cards in my hand for him. So we'll see if that happens or not. But, of course, there's very little I can do. We'll use Gene to move one space. Nothing to attack. I guess I'll clear Thug off. We use a single move card for Wolverine so that he can move twice with Gene's previous move and attack. Ah, hey, that worked out because that was Juggernaut's last health. I actually won a game. Mark your calendars, everyone. This is a milestone occasion for me. It's been quite a while. But yeah, that's Marvel United, and one of its subsets, of which, like I happened to mention last stream, they actually have quite a few of. There's a Deadpool subset, and there's a new Spider-Verse subset that's different than the Spider-Verse expansion I have. So I've got the Enter the Spider-Verse expansion, but there's an even newer set that's got even more spider characters in it, and because I pulled all of the cards out of his draw deck, Slinky. So once a draw deck's exhausted and all the cards in your hand are played for a certain hero, they're out of the game. And if all your heroes are out of the game, then you lose. So that's another loss criteria for the heroes. You can either lose by having everyone get KO'd, or you can lose by the villain completing their master plan. But either way, you lose. So, but that's, from what I've heard and read, that one of the easier Marvel games out there. It says 14 up, but I think it's probably not a bad game for even younger kids. The rules aren't terribly difficult, and once you remember how to do everything or when to do everything, which I absolutely didn't, because you see the end of turn benefits that I continued to ignore throughout the game after I cleared the threats. Like this one would have allowed me to move to Juggernaut's location anytime I wanted if I ended the turn on the X-Jet. But each of those end of turn criteria just flew right by me. I'm very bad at remembering all the little pieces that go together as I go through something like this. But like I said, there are several expansions. This one is an expansion to the main game, whereas the X-Men one that we just played is a standalone and doesn't need the core set to be played. Unfortunately, a lot of them seem to be out of print, and they're up to like $70 or $80 for a lot of the sets. So if this is a game that interests you, I'd recommend, seeing what you can find. For the standalone sets, I think the new Spider-Verse one is standalone, is currently still available, and that Deadpool one is still available. But like I said, the others are just terrible. Not to mention the game was launched as a Kickstarter, so there's a lot of Kickstarter pieces and additional Kickstarter benefits or stretch goals that were available. Things like individual characters. So here's a Doctor Strange that you can use to expand the game. It comes with the figure and the hero deck for that character as another option for your games. But some of those Kickstarter ones are just ridiculous. But yeah, overall, pretty fun game. I don't think I liked it quite as much as G.I. Joe last week, but still something I would play again. It's a good time. I think next week I'll go ahead and play Dune Imperium. A little spoiler, so you can plan whether or not you want to come take a look. So we'll introduce Doom Imperium on Tuesday and do a full playthrough on Saturday. And then the week after that, we'll go ahead and do a video game playthrough that next week, just to take a break from the board games. I promised Game Dude that it wouldn't be all board games all the time. So we'll see what video game comes up. Maybe I'll ask my Discord what their opinions are and take a consensus of what to play. But that's the plan, and now I'm off to finish working on my 1982 video for the Animated 80s Japan edition, and that'll be up on YouTube tomorrow. And I hope you all take a look at it and enjoy. And once that one is done, I'll be moving along to work on the Animated 90s in film, and probably do a couple of mini videos between the two. And I've got some other ideas percolating. So anyway, that's all I've got for today. So if you've got any questions, you all know where to find me, know how to get in contact with me, and hopefully I'll see you on the next stream. Take it easy, everyone.